Is there any pain greater than having the entire world in your hands, yet being unable to hold the hand of the one you love most? At Hollywood in 1958, icon Sammy Davis Jr. suddenly received a chilling ultimatum from the mafia. Stay away from that white girl for 48 hours, or you'll never see the sun again. That girl was none other than Kim Novak, the muse being protected at all costs by the Columbia Empire. The brutal truth was that the studio mogul himself had conspired with the underworld, turning their love into a problem that needed to be erased to preserve a pure white image. To survive, Sammy was forced into a humiliating script, marrying someone else just 2 days later to silence the public. Were these legends truly powerful, or merely pawns imprisoned in a glass cage of prejudice? Right now, let's uncover the love contract stained with blood and the shocking secrets of 7 of the most scandalous interracial couples in old Hollywood history. Subscribe now to unlock the next heart-shaking revelations. 1. Sammy Davis Jr. and Kim Novak, the contract at gunpoint. Hollywood in 1958 was no place for those who dared to challenge the racial divide. At the time, Sammy Davis Jr. was a premier entertainer, a multi-talented man who could sing, dance, and command any stage with his boundless energy. Yet even when surrounded by the dazzle of the red carpet, Sammy always felt an invisible, insurmountable barrier. He once bitterly confessed that in the eyes of the public and the powerful moguls, he was merely a high-end entertainer, a puppet helping studios rake in fortunes, but never regarded as a human being with equal rights in his private life. White high society was ready to applaud him on stage, but they would never accept him sitting at the same dinner table in luxury restaurants. Everything began to spiral out of control when he met Kim Novak. Kim wasn't just a star. She was the #1 muse of the Columbia Pictures empire, possessing a beauty dubbed the girl next door that every American man of that era yearned to protect. Amidst a superficial Hollywood, Kim looked at Sammy through entirely different eyes. She didn't see a black artist struggling against prejudice. She saw Sammy, a lonely soul longing to be understood. In a society divided by Jim Crow laws, their connection was like a small flame flickering in a powder keg of racial bias. Their love began in the shadows through clandestine dates. A single flash from a paparazzo's bulb was enough to collapse both their careers. The real earthquake erupted when Harry Cohn, the powerful president of Columbia Pictures, started catching wind of the affair through studio rumors. To Cohn, Kim Novak was not a human being. She was a $1 million asset. Records show that when Cohn discovered the relationship, he went livid. He knew all too well that the name Sammy Davis Jr. would destroy his money-making merchandise overnight if the public knew their muse was in love with a black man. When direct threats failed, Hollywood revealed its cruelest face through collusion with the underworld. Harry Cohn borrowed the iron fist of the mafia to handle this problem. One evening, Sammy was intercepted and detained by a group of strangers. Those were the longest moments of the artist's life. There were no bloody lashings, but the warning was bone-chilling. The mafia ordered him to stay away from Kim Novak within 48 hours, or he would never see the sun again. They reminded Sammy that they could take his life as easily as he had once lost an eye in a previous accident. Facing the edge of survival, Sammy was forced into a humiliating flight. To appease the fury of those in power, he had to accept a bitter marriage script. Within just 2 days, Sammy hastily married Lorraine White, a black dancer for whom he had almost no deep feelings. It was a sham wedding, a play stage to prove to the world that he still knew his place. Many witnesses recounted that on his wedding night, Sammy drank himself into a stupor just to escape the truth that he had just sold out his love in exchange for the right to live. This affair exposed the hypocrisy of Hollywood, a place that preached freedom, but used the underworld to suppress the right to love. Sammy and Kim could never be together, but their pain left a massive crack in the wall of prejudice. To the end of their lives, they maintained a special respect for each other through their memoirs. But Sammy Davis Jr. was not the only one breathlessly controlled behind the velvet curtain. In another corner, a rogue was also struggling amidst similar possessive desires and prejudices, but in a far more violent way. That man was Marlon Brando and his stormy romance with Rita Moreno. 2. Marlon Brando and Rita Moreno. A stormy romance in Hollywood's fleeting world. While Sammy Davis Jr. was fleeing from mafia gunpoints in another corner of the movie capital, a battle just as fierce was unfolding. It didn't take place on the streets, but simmered within bedrooms and the dark corners of the soul. This was where Marlon Brando, the rogue whose rugged beauty shattered every standard, met Rita Moreno, the radiant rose from Puerto Rico. Rita Moreno once recalled the first moment she saw Marlon on the set of the film Désirée in 1954. Just looking at him, my body temperature skyrocketed as if I had been thrown into a furnace. Little did she know that this furnace would consume her life and her self-esteem for nearly a decade to follow. In a Hollywood that consistently looked down upon Latino actors, casting them as hot-tempered or promiscuous side characters, Marlon and Rita's romance was a subtle act of defiance. Marlon Brando, with his rebellious nature and disdain for control, found a kindred spirit in Rita's wounded soul. But the tragedy lay in the fact that Marlon loved Rita like a possessor who never intended to belong to her. In her 2013 memoir, Rita Moreno revealed a bitter truth. Marlon Brando had a pathological obsession with control. He could cheat openly and marry another woman right before her eyes, but the moment he saw Rita trying to leave in search of new happiness, he would instantly reappear. There is a famous anecdote about Rita deciding to date the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, simply to retaliate against Marlon's philandering. Yet contrary to the glitz of the tabloids, she admitted Elvis was quite dull, and the act only served to ignite Marlon's possessive rage. He would kneel, beg, and weep to drag her back into his glass cage, only to betray her again later. The peak of the tragedy came when Rita discovered she was pregnant. Instead of providing protection, Marlon coldly arranged a secret abortion through an unskilled doctor to avoid tarnishing the bachelor god image that the studio had painstakingly built. The failed surgery nearly cost Rita her life, but more painful than the physical trauma was Marlon's subsequent coldness. Feeling humiliated and abandoned, Rita Moreno attempted to end her life with sleeping pills right inside Marlon's house. Fortunately, she was saved, and it was then she realized she had to escape this deity with an angelic face but a tempestuous soul. At the time, the studio made every effort to suppress news of the suicide attempt to protect Brando's reputation, leaving Rita alone with her psychological scars. Their affair serves as a testament to the struggle between the artistic ego and societal constraints. Hollywood could accept a rebellious Marlon Brando on screen, but they would not accept a prestigious white actor formally involved with a woman of color. Marlon himself, despite his vocal advocacy for racial equality, could never overcome the ghost of patriarchy and the desire to preserve his status within the elite. Years later, when both were on the waning side of their careers, they reunited on the set of The Night of the Following Day. Rita said that seeing Marlon old and frail, she felt no hatred, only pity for a genius who had spent his life hiding his true self. She shared, "His scent still makes me tremble, not out of love, but because of the memory of a storm that has passed." The control and pain endured by Rita Moreno mirror the cruelty that stars of color faced when entering the white elite circle. But if Rita and Marlon were a violent storm, the next story is an agonizing, suffocating silence. It is when a true queen of the screen had to face a choice: keep the child in her womb or keep the career at its pinnacle. We are talking about Dorothy Dandridge and her tragic ballad with her boss, director Otto Preminger. 3. Dorothy Dandridge and Otto Preminger, The Pink Glass Cage. If Marlon Brando and Rita Moreno were a violent storm, then Dorothy Dandridge's story is a sigh-proud, yet profoundly tragic. Dorothy was more than just an actress. She was an icon. In 1954, she made history as the first black woman to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. Yet behind that dazzling radiance, her life was imprisoned in a glass cage crafted by the man she loved and the society of her time. It all began on the set of the masterpiece, Carmen Jones. There, Dorothy met Otto Preminger, a powerful white director known for his dictatorial and hot-tempered personality. Otto was the one who molded Dorothy's success, but he was also the one who stifled her life. In contrast to his ferocity, before the film crew, Otto became strangely vulnerable and infatuated in Dorothy's presence. They plunged into a clandestine affair that Hollywood at the time called an open secret. However, their love struck the stone wall of American law. In the 1950s, anti-miscegenation laws were still in effect in many states. A prestigious white director like Otto could not openly hold hands with a black woman like Dorothy on the red carpet without facing legal and public retribution. Dorothy, a woman admired by the entire world on screen, had to sneak into her lover's house through the back door in real life to avoid the prying eyes of neighbors. The peak of this cruelty occurred when Dorothy discovered she was pregnant. Instead of being a source of happiness, the child became a nightmare for both their careers. Otto understood that if the truth were exposed, he would not only lose his reputation, but could also face imprisonment. With his characteristic dominance, Otto pressured Dorothy into a secret abortion. It was a decision that tore Dorothy's soul apart, leaving her to forever carry the pain of a lost child and the humiliation of being unable to protect her own right to motherhood. As the filming ended and the red carpet lights dimmed, their relationship began to fracture. Otto continued his illustrious career, while Dorothy spiraled into a vortex of depression and financial crisis. Hollywood had cheered for her, but refused to give her roles worthy of her talent simply because of her skin color. She became a priced ornament, expensive but profoundly lonely. Post-production records show that during her darkest nights she frequently called Otto in vain, seeking a shred of comfort from the man who had once promised her the world. The death of Dorothy Dandridge at the age of 42 due to a drug overdose remains a haunting question. Was it an accident or a final escape? She passed away in poverty with only a few dollars left in her bank account, a stark contrast to the glamorous image of years prior. Dorothy's story is a grim testament that Hollywood can grant you fame, but it will take your soul if you dare to love the wrong person at the wrong time. Dorothy Dandridge's sacrifice is a somber note in the collective ballad of black women in the film capital. But not everyone chose to end in darkness. In another world, there was a woman who chose to face prejudice with intellect and an unprecedented regal poise. That woman was Diahann Carroll and her transoceanic romance with journalist David Frost, a place where the boundaries between two continents were easier to cross than the boundaries of skin color. 4. Diahann Carroll dan David Frost, When Love Cannot Conquer Borders. There was a question that once sent ripples through 1960s. New York high society. What would happen if the most elegant woman in America fell in love with the most powerful man on British television? At a time when Hollywood was still grappling with antiquated racial prejudices, Diahann Carroll and David Frost appeared as a proud declaration of intellect and freedom. Theirs was not a romance of loud outbursts or cheap scandals. It was a symphony of wisdom played out across two oceans. Diahann Carroll was not the typical black actress seen on screen at the time. She didn't play the maid, nor was she a mere sensual ornament. In 1968, she became the first black woman to star in a television series where the character was not a domestic worker, the groundbreaking show, Julia. Diahann brought a breath of fresh air, sophisticated, educated, and deeply nuanced. It was perhaps this very intellect that led her to David Frost, the legendary British journalist who would later shake the world with his explosive interview of President Richard Nixon. They met when both were at the pinnacle of their careers. David Frost, with his suave demeanor and razor-sharp mind, was completely captivated by Diahann. In her memoirs, Diahann recounted that David loved her soul before he loved her looks. Between them, there were no class barriers or trivial conflicts. They spent hours debating politics, art, and the shifting tides of the world. To David, Diahann was not a star of color. She was an intellectual peer. However, the historical context created an invisible wall between them. Diahann Carroll once shared a now classic line that dissected the grim reality of that era. "In England, I feel like a woman. But when I return to America, I feel like a woman of color." In London, she and David could freely hold hands in the finest restaurants and attend gala dinners with the elite without a single judgmental glance. But the moment the plane touched down in New York, she faced the reality that many American audiences were not yet ready to accept their pure Julia being engaged to a white man. The pressure began to weigh heavily on the couple when they announced their engagement in 1972. Studios and sponsors feared that Diahann's private life would affect the ratings of her hit series. Meanwhile, David Frost faced whispers back home about choosing a foreign wife with such significant political influence. Both of their careers began to be treated as pawns in the hands of power brokers. Their love, originally ethereal and above prejudice, was dragged into the mire of calculated figures and economic interests. The tragedy of Diahann Carroll and David Frost lay not in betrayal or hatred, but in the agonizing choice of reason. After months of being hounded by the press and receiving anonymous threats targeted at Diahann, they realized that to stay together, one of them would have to completely abandon their glory. David could not leave his media empire in the UK, and Diahann could not walk away from the battle for the status of black people in Hollywood that she had so painstakingly built. They were engaged in hope, but they parted in a silence that was heartbreakingly quiet. Their relationship leaves a major question for sociology. Can love truly cross borders when those borders are not on a map? But in the minds of millions of viewers, Diahann Carroll chose to move on and married someone else. But in the pages of her late-life memoir, "The Legs Are the Last to Go," she still dedicated the most beautiful chapters to David Frost. She called it, "The Time I Felt I Could Truly Breathe." The story of Diahann and David is a testament to how racial prejudice can kill a relationship, even when it is built on the deepest mutual understanding. But while Diahann chose to withdraw with elegance, another woman chose to confront the system head-on, using her very wildness to challenge the most conservative minds at the White House. We are talking about Eartha Kitt, the woman whom even the CIA feared, and her strange connection with the uncrowned king of world cinema, Orson Welles. 5. Eartha Kitt and Orson Welles, The Dance of Giants. In the mid-1950s, while Hollywood was still busy trying to pigeonhole black women into submissive or domestic roles, Eartha Kitt arrived like a slap in the face to every convention. She wasn't just an artist. She was a force of nature, a woman with a haunting voice, piercing eyes, and a level of confidence that bordered on defiance. It was this intellectual wildness that led her to Orson Welles, the man dubbed the most eccentric genius in cinema and the father of the masterpiece, Citizen Kane. Their meeting didn't start with sweet flirtations, but with a recognition between two great minds. Orson Welles, a powerful white man notorious for his arrogance, once exclaimed, "Eartha Kitt is the most exciting woman in the world." In Orson's eyes, Eartha wasn't just a singer of color for entertainment. She was an artistic phenomenon, a woman with the grit to stand as his equal in heated debates about philosophy, politics, and drama. Their love didn't unfold at glitzy red carpet parties where the judgmental glares of the elite lay in wait. Instead, they often spent hours in private libraries or the dark corners of backstage immersed in books. Orson was infatuated with Eartha because she was the only one who dared to challenge his wildest ideas. For a Hollywood struggling to keep stars within racial templates, the connection between the uncrowned king and the Black Panther was a genuine threat to social order. The tragedy of this relationship lay in the fact that it was too big for the glass cage of the era. Eartha Kitt didn't just love a white man, she was a woman with fiercely powerful political views. Later, after she publicly criticized the Vietnam War at the White House, in front of the First Lady, she was blacklisted by the CIA and effectively exiled from the American entertainment industry for years. Her closeness to Orson Welles, a man already under government scrutiny for his liberal ideologies, terrified the studios. They feared that the union of these two rebels would set an uncontrollable precedent. Although Orson Welles gave Eartha career-defining roles, most notably Helen of Troy in his play, Faust pressure from censors and sponsors gradually pushed them apart. Hollywood could tolerate an eccentric genius like Orson, but it wasn't ready for an interracial couple with enough intellectual power to shift public perception. Their love, built on mutual admiration rather than mere lust, eventually gave way to political calculations and the fears of studio moguls. Eartha Kitt once shared that Orson was the only person who saw her true soul behind the sensual exterior. They didn't part because they stopped loving each other, but because the world at that time was too small for two giants to share the same frame. Eartha chose a life of exile in Europe to find her freedom, carrying with her the memory of the man who called her the most exciting woman in the world. Their story is proof that racial prejudice doesn't just block love, it blocks the greatest artistic collaborations. But if Eartha and Orson were an intellectual explosion, the next couple was a secret cloaked in much darker, more ethereal tones. This is where James Dean, the immortal icon of rebellion, found a kindred spirit in the shadows with the vampira, Maila Nurmi, a relationship Hollywood tried to cover up with tales of witches' curses. 6. James Dean and Maila Nurmi, a symphony of shadows. If Eartha Kitt and Orson Welles were an explosion of brilliant intellect, the relationship between James Dean and Maila Nurmi was like a dark symphony played out in the most secluded corners of the movie capital. In 1950s Hollywood, James Dean was the embodiment of rebellion, a bad boy with a brooding look that captivated millions. Meanwhile, Maila Nurmi, famous as Vampira, was the icon of horror, a woman with pale skin, cold eyes, and an ethereal presence never before seen on television. Their bond didn't begin at red carpet galas. It blossomed from long, lonely nights. Maila Nurmi later recounted that James Dean would often drive to her apartment at midnight, not to seek typical carnal thrills, but simply to sit together in silence in the dark, listening to classical music. They shared a strange connection rooted in the resonance of two wounded souls, outcasts in the very heart of dazzling Hollywood. James Dean found in Maila an understanding that the pure white roses orchestrated by the studios could never offer. In turn, Maila saw past James's reckless exterior to a child desperate for affection. However, to Warner Brothers, this relationship was a PR disaster. James Dean was being groomed as a promising young hero, a symbol of the new American youth. His association with a ghoul girl as bizarre and occult-leaning as Maila Nurmi was simply unacceptable. When photos of them together began to hit the press, Warner Brothers launched a ruthless media campaign to tear them apart. Rather than acknowledging a unique friendship or love, the studio began weaving tales that Maila had bewitched James. They branded her a witch, a sinister influence leading the young star down a dark path. The prejudice here didn't just target race or religion. This time it struck at the strangeness of their lifestyle and artistic mindset. True tragedy struck when James Dean suddenly died in a horrific car crash at the age of 24. Instantly, Maila Nurmi became the scapegoat for the public's grief. Rumors that she had cursed James spread across Hollywood, collapsing her career overnight. The studio exploited James's death to create an immortal legend, while simultaneously erasing every trace of the woman who had truly been by his side during his loneliest hours. Years later, in declassified biographies, it was revealed that James had once given Maila a photo inscribed, "To the person who understands me best." Maila Nurmi lived out her final years in poverty and ostracization, carrying the secret of a romance crushed by the cruelty of the entertainment machine. They loved each other in the dark, and it was that very darkness that the moguls used to bury the truth about them forever. The story of James Dean and Maila Nurmi is a painful testament to Hollywood's willingness to destroy an individual to protect a star's idealized image. But if this was a tragedy of misunderstanding and gloom, The final story on our list is an epic of patience. A love that did not just cross the color line but triumphed over time and public coldness to reach a quiet, fulfilling end. We are talking about Lena Horne and her invisible 20-year marriage to Lenny Hayton, where love learned to survive in absolute silence. 7. Lena Horne and Lenny Hayton. The 20-year war in silence. While previous stories may have ended in regret or tragedy, this final chapter is an epic of patience. It serves as proof that love can slip through the narrowest cracks of prejudice to survive, even if the price is foregoing the world's recognition. Lena Horne, MGM's Queen of Color, and Lenny Hayton, a powerful white musical director, wrote a love story that took Hollywood decades to truly comprehend. Lena Horne was always an icon of pride. She was the first black woman to sign a long-term contract with a major studio like MGM, yet she was also the one who most keenly felt the isolation of being a showpiece. In films, Lena's scenes were often designed to be easily edited out when screened in the American South, where racial segregation remained fiercely entrenched. Within that lavish yet cold glass cage, Lenny Hayton appeared not as a boss, but as a silent protector. Their romance blossomed amidst musical melodies and suffocating public pressure. In 1947, realizing that American society at the time would never permit a legitimate wedding, Lena and Lenny made a bold decision. They secretly flew to France to marry. In Paris, they were legally husband and wife, but the moment their plane touched down in Los Angeles, they were forced to become strangers again. For 3 long years, Lena had to keep her wedding ring hidden in a locked drawer, and they lived under the guise of close colleagues to protect their respective careers. The tragedy for Lena and Lenny came not only from the white elite, but from within their own communities. Many in the black community at the time criticized Lena for marrying a white man, viewing it as a betrayal of her roots. Meanwhile, Lenny's family, conservative Jews, refused to accept Lena. They were caught between 2 fires of prejudice with nowhere to seek shelter. Lena once admitted a heartbreaking truth. "Initially, I married him to get back at society, to prove I could have the man they told me I wasn't allowed to touch. But then his kindness made me truly love him." For 20 years, Lenny Hayton accepted standing in the shadows so that Lena could shine. He sought no fame for himself, instead using his musical talent to envelop and support the woman he loved through the darkest stages of her career. They navigated the years when an interracial kiss was still considered a sin, until the civil rights movement erupted, and the truth of their marriage was finally accepted by the public. When Lenny passed away in 1971, Lena Horne was completely devastated. She declared, "He was the only man who truly protected me from the world." The legacy they left behind is more than just timeless music. It is proof that love can triumph when one is patient enough to wait for the world to catch up. 7 couples, 7 different destinies, but all are pieces of an era where the human heart was weighed against skin color and profit. From the mafia's gun barrels aimed at Sammy Davis Jr. to the 20-year secret marriage of Lena Horne, Golden Age, Hollywood concealed agonies that the red carpet's glamour could never mask. Their stories remind us that behind every brilliant frame of film are real people fighting silent battles for the right to love and to be themselves. They weren't just in love, they were challenging a ruthless system of rules to preserve the last shred of humanity amidst a film capital rife with control. Among these 7 stories, whose sacrifice do you find the most meaningful, or is fame truly worth trading? For a life lived in the shadows, let us know your thoughts in the comments so we can discuss. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking revelations from cinematic history. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.